Sarah Bennett was homeless, living in her car with her 2 children when the call came. The will was being read. Her siblings gathered in a mahogany-paneled office where the air conditioning hummed at a perfect 68 degrees. Ice clinked in crystal glasses. Leather chair springs creaked as they shifted in their seats. She listened on a borrowed phone, the speaker crackling in the dry desert heat, the vinyl seat beneath her thighs burning through her jeans from the afternoon sun that had turned the car into an oven. Her brother got the Manhattan penthouse. Her sister got the stock portfolio and the vacation homes. One by one, the empire their father built was divided among the vultures. Then came her name. The lawyer's voice was flat, impersonal. To my daughter, Sarah Bennett, I bequeath Parcel 7 in Black Rock County, a plot of undeveloped desert land with a storage structure. A storage structure. A shed. The silence on the line was absolute for 3 full seconds. Then it came, not a chuckle, but a full, roaring laugh from her brother. She heard the crystal glass in his hand clink against the mahogany desk as he threw his head back. Her sister joined, a sharp sound like silk scarves rustling across expensive fabric. It was the sound of a family closing a door. The line went dead, their laughter the last thing she heard. She sat in the driver's seat, her children sleeping in the back, their faces slick with sweat. The dashboard vinyl was hot enough to raise a welt on her forearm. She had exactly $127 in the world, a tank of gas, and now, a patch of sand no one wanted. What did her father, a man of immense calculation, truly leave her in that emptiness? For her siblings, the inheritance was a transaction. Signatures on thick paper in climate-controlled rooms, billions of dollars moving between accounts with the quiet click of a mouse. Their world was one of portfolios and projections, a world made of paper. Sarah's world was made of vinyl seats and hunger. It was counting out coins on a laundromat counter, hoping she had enough to wash the clothes that smelled of car and fast food. It was her daughter, Lily, whispering if they could have a real bed soon. It was her son, Jake, pretending not to be scared when the parking lot security light flickered out at night. The only official correspondence she received was a single envelope. Inside was a deed for Lot 7, Black Rock County, and a $5 bill paperclipped to a note. For outstanding fees, it read. $5. That's what the system thought her inheritance was worth. The deed felt thin, worthless. A week later, a forwarded email appeared. Her sister, in a moment of what she probably called charity, had sent it. It was from a land acquisition firm. We understand you are the owner of an unimproved parcel in Black Rock County, it began. They offered $3,000 for it. A throwaway price for a throwaway piece of earth for a throwaway person. The message was clear. Take this insulting money and disappear. Stop being their problem. That night, as her children slept curled together in the back seat, Sarah made a choice. She had no other options. No family, no home, no future in this city. She had a deed, a vague location on a map, and a car that might just make it. She pointed the sedan toward the desert. It wasn't hope that guided her. It was the absence of anywhere else to go. It was a destination, at least. The highway shrank into a 2-lane road, then a cracked single lane, and finally a dirt track that wandered off into a vast, ochre nothing. The air grew hazy with heat. The only signs of life were the twisted skeletons of Joshua trees and the occasional sun-bleached skull of a cow. The dirt track ended at a rusted wire fence. A metal gate, sagging on one hinge, bore a faded number 7. This was it. She stepped out of the car. The heat hit her like a physical wall. The silence was immense, a ringing absence of sound. And there, in the middle of a sun-scorched flat, was her inheritance. The storage structure was a corrugated metal shed, not much bigger than a single-car garage. Time and sand had battered it. The metal was bleached to a pale silver, rust eating through the seams like a disease. One whole side was half buried in a drift of orange sand. It looked less like a building and more like a giant, discarded tin can that had rolled to a stop at the end of the world. The weight of it crushed the air from her lungs. This was what her father thought of her. This was her share of a fortune. "Is this our new house, Mummy?" Lily asked, her small voice filled with a hope so fragile it broke Sarah's heart. "For now, baby," Sarah whispered, the lie tasting like dust. "For now." That first night, they slept on the shed's concrete floor in their sleeping bags. The wind was a constant presence, scraping grains of sand against the metal walls in a whispering, sighing sound. It was the sound of emptiness, the sound of being forgotten. In the morning, with a pragmatism born of survival, Sarah decided to clean. If they had to be here, they would make it livable. She swept out decades of sand and debris. That's when she noticed it. The floor was one solid, continuous slab of poured concrete, thick, industrial. Strange for a simple storage shed. As she swept near the back wall, her broom handle tapped the floor. The sound changed, from a solid thunk to a hollow tock. She stopped, tapped again. There was a distinct difference. A section of the floor, about 3 feet square, sounded empty beneath. She knelt, brushing away the last layer of fine dust. There were no visible seams, no handles, just solid, unbroken concrete. But her ears didn't lie. The floor was hollow. In this place of nothing, her father had built a secret. Sarah ran her fingers over the cool concrete. The difference was real. She found a rusty screwdriver in the debris pile and used it to chip at the edge of the hollow-sounding square. A small flake of concrete came away. Underneath, she saw not dirt but dark, aged wood. It wasn't a floorboard set in concrete. It was a wooden lid, cleverly disguised, with a thin layer of cement skinned over the top. Her heart began to hammer. She worked the screwdriver into the seam, prying. With a groan of protest, the wooden panel lifted. It wasn't nailed. It was set into a precise groove. Beneath it was not earth, but a ring of black iron, cold and heavy, set flush into another surface. A trap door. She grabbed the ring with both hands. It refused to budge. Decades of sand and disuse had sealed it shut. It took her an hour. She used the screwdriver to scrape the compacted grit from the seam. She poured the last of their drinking water around the edges, hoping to loosen the grip. Finally, she stood on the ring, using her full weight. There was a terrible, grating shriek of metal on concrete. Then, movement. The massive slab tilted upward on hidden hinges, revealing a square of pure darkness. A wave of air washed over her, cold, dry, and smelling of stale metal and old dust. It was a shock in the desert heat. She pointed her phone's flashlight down. A ladder made of welded rebar descended into the black. It didn't look like a root cellar. It looked industrial. She told the kids to stay by the car, then she began to climb down. The temperature dropped with every rung. 20 feet down, her light found the bottom. Not a dirt floor, but more concrete. And set into the far wall was a door. Not a wooden door, a vault door. Circular, made of brushed steel, with a heavy locking wheel and a modern electronic keypad beside it. Her breath caught. A vault. 30 feet underground, in the middle of nowhere. She approached it. The keypad was dead, no lights, no combination. Her father hadn't given her one. She shone her light around the seam of the door, looking for a clue, and there, etched with delicate precision into the concrete next to the ladder's top rung, was a date. E.S.T. 1962. Not her father's birth year, her grandfather's. The man who founded the family fortune. It wasn't a combination. It was a signpost. The first confirmation that none of this was an accident. It was a message, left in the one place only someone desperate enough to clean the floor would find it. She stood before the vault door, the cold from the steel seeping into her bones. 1962. It was the only key she had. She reached out and typed the 4 digits into the dark keypad. 1962. Nothing happened for a second. Then, a single green light blinked on. A low, mechanical hum filled the small chamber. With a series of heavy, solid clunks that vibrated up through the concrete floor, the massive locking bolts inside the door disengaged. The central wheel began to turn on its own, slowly, with a hydraulic hiss. The door swung inward, silent on its hinges. Sarah stepped through, her phone's light swallowed by the space beyond. Then, with a soft click, overhead lights flickered on. Not the harsh glow of fluorescence, but the warm, steady light of vintage glass sconces. They illuminated a scene frozen in time. This was not a dark bunker. It was a preserved slice of another era. A mid-century modern living room, complete with a low-slung leather sofa, a teak coffee table, and abstract art on the paneled walls. The air was still, cool, and perfectly dry. The silence was absolute, a deep, pressurized quiet. She walked through the main room into a hallway. Doors lined it. She opened the first. A fully stocked pantry, shelves lined with military-issue canned goods, water drums, and survival supplies dated from the 1960s. The next room was a dormitory with bunk beds, wool blankets still neatly folded. But the third room made her stop. It was an archive and a treasury. One wall held shelves of gold bars stacked neatly, gleaming dully under the lights. Another wall had lockboxes. She opened one. It was filled with bearer bonds, old, crisp certificates from companies whose names she vaguely recognized. Giants that had been acquired, merged, swallowed up by the conglomerates of today. On a wide steel desk in the center of the room, a single item waited. A sealed envelope, her name written on it in her father's unmistakable, sharp handwriting. The sheer scale of the wealth was disorienting. It was a numbing, abstract shock. But the letter, that thin paper, was a direct line to him. That was what terrified her. She picked it up. The envelope was heavy, expensive. She slid her finger under the flap and pulled out the pages inside. His voice, in ink, filled the silent room. My dear Sarah, if you are reading this, you have ignored the laughter. You have chosen the sand over the silver. I knew you would. I have watched for years as your brother and sister became reflections of the world I built. All surface, no foundation. They see portfolios, they see leverage. They never learned to see a home. The fortune I left them is paper. It can be burned, stolen, squandered. It will keep them busy, keep their eyes glittering and fixed on each other, and away from this patch of desert, away from you. What they think is worthless is the only thing of true value I ever created. It is the one thing they cannot steal from you, because they cannot conceive of its worth. You have your mother's heart. You build homes, not empires. So I built one for you. The gold is for security. The bonds, look at the issuing companies. They no longer exist. They were all acquired, decades ago, by a single holding company. The certificates are historical curiosities, but the ownership they represented was transferred. The holding company that owns everything now is listed on the last page. You own it, a controlling interest. You are not just rich, Sarah. You are the majority shareholder in the very conglomerate your siblings worship. The foundation of their paper world is yours. She lowered the pages, her hands trembling. The quiet of the vault was now a roaring in her ears. She wasn't standing in a tomb. She was standing in the control room. Her father hadn't disinherited her. He had hidden the master switch. She read the letter again, each word a hammer blow to the reality she had lived. He confessed it plainly. He had seen their true natures take root years ago. The greed, the cunning, the instinct to take rather than build. Leaving them the liquid fortune, the mansions, the stocks, was a strategy. It was bait. It was a glittering distraction to keep the wolves fed and looking at each other, so they would never sniff around the barren plot he had quietly deeded to himself decades prior. The one thing they can't steal from you, he wrote, is what they think is worthless. The reason it was for her was simple, and it cut deeper than any insult. You have your mother's heart. In a world of takers, you are the only one who ever tried to build a home. I am giving you the foundation." Then came the practical, devastating truth. The bearer bonds were not direct cash. They were artifacts. The companies, a steel manufacturer, a railroad line, an aerospace contractor, had all been absorbed into a vast, modern corporate entity years ago. The bonds themselves were functionally obsolete. But the equity they represented had been meticulously converted, tracked, and consolidated under a single corporate umbrella, a holding company so blandly named it was invisible. The name was at the bottom of the page. Bennett Legacy Holdings. Her father's final instruction was a quiet detonation. "The holding company that owns them now is listed. It's yours. The shares are held in a trust, accessible only to the bearer of this letter and the verified heir to this land. Your siblings sit on the board of the operating companies. They manage the day-to-day. They do not own the ground beneath their feet. You do." The money in the vault was staggering, but it was static, a relic. This was alive. This was power. It was the silent majority ownership of the very engine of her family's wealth. The empire her brother bragged about controlling, the portfolio her sister curated, they were tenants. She was the landlord. She sat down in the desk chair, the cool leather sighing under her weight. The emotional storm didn't come as tears or shouts. It came as a profound, chilling clarity. Her entire life, the neglect, the condescension, the final cruel laughter, had been part of a test she didn't know she was taking. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He had been watching. He had been waiting to see if the world would break her, or if she would prove to be the only part of his legacy made of something stronger than money. He had left his ruthless children a kingdom of paper, knowing they would eventually tear it to shreds. He had left his gentle daughter the keystone, knowing she was the only one who could bear its weight. The letter ended not with a sign-off, but a challenge. "Do not come for revenge. They are not worth your spirit. Come for restoration. Build your home on this truth. It is the only foundation that lasts." Sarah folded the pages. The silence of the vault was no longer empty. It was full of his intention. She was not a homeless mother clutching a miracle. She was a woman standing in a room her father had built for her 30 years ago, finally arriving at the address. Sarah's first move was quiet. She took a single gold bar from the vault, wrapped it in an old t-shirt, and drove to the nearest town, a dusty cluster of buildings 30 miles away. She found a lawyer's office above a hardware store. The lawyer, a weary man named Ed Miller, listened to her story with polite skepticism until she placed the gold bar on his desk. His skepticism turned to shock, then to focused intensity. He verified the deed. He made discreet calls about the bonds. Within 72 hours, he confirmed it. The assets were real. The holding company existed. And Sarah Bennett, owner of a desert shed, was its primary beneficiary. While her lawyer worked, Sarah's siblings moved in their world of paper. They finalized a massive desert development deal, a planned community of luxury homes. Their project needed one thing: water rights for the entire valley. The key parcel controlling those rights was Lot 7, Black Rock County. The worthless shed stood directly over the aquifer their blueprints required. They called her. The number flashed on her new, cheap phone. Her brother's voice was all practiced warmth and condescension. "Sarah, we've been thinking. That land of yours, it's a burden. Let us help. We'll give you $5,000. A fresh start. You can get a proper place for you and the kids." She could hear the smile in his voice, the certainty of her gratitude. They were offering charity. They were buying their conscience clean for pennies. Sarah looked out the shed door at the vast, empty sky. "No, thank you," she said, her voice calm. The silence on the line was brief. Then irritation sharpened his tone. "Don't be foolish, Sarah. This is the only offer you'll get.
You're impeding a major development. We could make things very difficult." "I understand," she said simply. They did not. A week later, their lawyer's letter arrived at Ed Miller's office. It was a formal notice.
It accused Sarah of willfully impeding reasonable land development and threatened legal action, including a petition to the county to seize the parcel for essential utility access. It was a bully's document, meant to terrify. Ed Miller showed it to Sarah. "They're playing the only hand they think you have," he said. "Poverty." Sarah nodded. "Send them a reply." Her lawyer's response was a single page, not on his own modest letterhead, on the crisp, embossed stationery of Bennett Legacy Holdings. It was addressed to the CEO of the development partnership, a man her siblings answered to. The letter did not mention Sarah. It did not mention the shed. It stated, in precise legal terms, that the board of the majority shareholder had reviewed the proposed development's attempt to pressure a small landholder in Black Rock County and found it contrary to the ethical investment principles of this fund. It requested an immediate cessation of all hostile actions toward the parcel in question, pending a full audit of the development's practices. It was signed by Ed Miller, acting counsel for Bennett Legacy Holdings. Sarah's brother called again within the hour. This time there was no warmth. His voice was a tight wire of confusion and dawning panic. "Sarah, what is this? What have you done?" "This is a mistake. You need to tell your lawyer to stand down immediately." "It's not a mistake," Sarah said, the quiet of the vault in her voice. "The letter is correct." "You don't understand the forces you're playing with," he shouted, the mask of the benevolent brother gone, revealing the raw fear beneath. "You'll ruin everything." "No," Sarah said, the word final. "I'm just clarifying who owns what." She ended the call. The silence that followed was different from the desert's emptiness. It was the silence of a mask hitting the floor. The performance was over. The kind sister, the helpless charity case was gone. In her place was a shareholder, a beneficiary, a woman who held the deed to the ground they were standing on. They had laughed at the shed. They had never thought to look beneath it. Now, the foundation of their world had just shifted, and they were scrambling on paper, trying to find their balance. Her siblings' investigation was frantic and quiet. They pulled corporate records, traced holding companies, and finally, through a shell-shocked accountant, they found the truth. Their sister did not just own a vault. She owned the parent company of their main investor. The foundation of their deal, their wealth, their entire sense of superiority was sand, and she held the deed to the bedrock. Their next call was not a threat. It was an invitation. Their voices were strained silk. "Sarah, we need to talk. As a family. Let's meet. Discuss the future. We can work together on this." Sarah agreed to a meeting, but not in a boardroom. She gave them coordinates. The desert, outside the shed. They arrived in a convoy of dust-coated luxury SUVs, their fine clothes absurd against the baked earth. Her brother stepped out, squinting in the harsh light. Her sister looked at the shed as if it were a toxic spill. "Sarah," her brother began, spreading his hands in a gesture of peace. "We've had misunderstandings, but we're family. We should unite our assets. Think of the legacy." Sarah stood between them and the shed's open door, the ladder to the vault hidden inside. She wore jeans and a simple shirt. She did not offer them water. She let the heat and the silence do their work. "I have terms," she said, her voice carrying easily in the still air. "Not for negotiation." She listed them, one by one. First, the trust fund their father had set up for her children, which they had legally maneuvered to dissolve, would be restored, with compounded interest paid from their personal shares. Second, they would sign a public, notarized affidavit acknowledging their manipulation of the will's execution and their attempt to disinherit her. It would be held by her lawyer, a permanent guarantee. Third, their desert development could proceed, but with a binding covenant. The land for a mile in every direction around this shed
would be designated a permanent conservation easement, untouchable, forever.
Their reactions played across their faces like a grim theater. First, fury, red and immediate. Then, calculation, the cold math of loss. Finally, a bitter, seething acceptance. They were cornered. To fight her was to fight their own funding, to expose their own fraud, to lose everything in a public war they could not win. "This is extortion," her sister hissed. "No," Sarah said, looking past them to the vast, empty land. "This is the original will. This is what Father intended. You got the paper, I got the foundation. You can keep your paper. I'm just securing my foundation." They argued. They pleaded. They tried one last time to appeal to a shared history that had never existed, but Sarah's calm was unbreakable. She had slept on this concrete floor. She had heard her children's hungry whispers in the back of a car. The things they valued held no power over her anymore. They signed the preliminary documents there, on the hood of their SUV, using a pen from Sarah's glove compartment. The signatures were jagged, angry things. They left in another cloud of dust, their perfect world fractured. Sarah did not watch them go. She turned her back and walked to the shed. She knelt, placing her hand on the warm concrete floor, directly over the hidden vault below. The reckoning was not in their defeat. It was in her stillness. They had come to the desert to make a deal. They had left having finally met the woman their father had chosen all along. The one who could not be bought, because she had already chosen the sand. Sarah did not build a mansion. She used the wealth to build a home. A simple, solid house was constructed above the vault, powered by a solar grid, watered by a deep well. The shed remained, a quiet monument and the entrance to their security. Her children's room was filled with morning light, not the gloom of a car back seat. The bunker's real value wasn't the gold. It was the time capsule of her father's true intent, preserved against the family's rot. He didn't give her a fortune. He gave her a choice they never had. The choice to build from a foundation of truth, not greed. On her porch at night, the desert sky is vast and clear. The distant glow of her siblings' world is just a faint smudge on the horizon. She is not in their world. She built her own. The world laughed at what she was given. They didn't see the foundation. If your foundation feels like sand right now, look deeper. Sometimes what you need is buried. Subscribe for more stories where the overlooked find their footing.